Okay, we're going to start with opening statement, and that's 1.5 minutes. 1 minute. Oh, John said you guys don't get that half anymore. All right, and he's going to pick who goes first.
It's not anymore, that's the format. Hey, we will start with District Attorney Robbie.
Good evening. Good evening. It's been an honor to serve for the last 3.5 years in the office of District Attorney. I'm proud to be the only genuine Republican on the stage, not a pretend one. I'm proud that I represent a community that shares my conservative values. I've been a Republican out of belief going all the way back to Ronald Reagan. I'm also the only person in the primary who is not a career bureaucrat, and I feel honored to serve, not entitled to high positions in the government. During the 3.5 years, despite the difficulties of the pandemic and other things, we've improved the office, we've rebuilt it from the ground up after 10 years of neglect, and navigated through, as I said, the pandemic and other challenges. We have a new approach to prosecuting, look first to the harm caused, and then to what would be a just outcome, as opposed to the traditional bureaucratic approach of just going for statistics. We want to balance protecting the community with protecting our constitutional rights, and that is what we're doing. My team and I are proud to be moving forward and hope you will give us the chance to keep going. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kunzi.
Thank you. Good evening. Being district attorney cannot be just a job. It needs to be a calling. You can't do that job unless you're dedicated to serving. I've been a resident of this county for 23 years. I'm a veteran. I've been a longtime board member of No to Abuse, Nevada Outreach. I've also been a founding member of the CASA, and I currently serve on that board as the president. I've also been a longtime youth coach and also a member of the Trump Rotary. I believe in giving back to my community. When Madison formed this government, he indicated that in order for this to work, our leaders had to be virtuous, which he defined as being able to put your personal interest, or subordinate your personal interest to the interest of the public. And those are principles that I follow, and those are principles that I believe in, and I will take those principles with me and make every decision I make as district attorney based upon those decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Kunzi. That's your time.
All right, just in case everybody doesn't know about your experience and background, that qualifies you to have the position of Nye County District Attorney. That'll be our first question.
And now you get 1.5 minutes. And we'll start with Mr. Kunzi.
Well, I think the strong. Is that working?
This is a test.
Test. I think the strongest attribute I have is I've actually been a prosecutor for over 20 years. I really pride myself on the level of prosecutions that I've done. I've managed offices, I've supervised many attorneys. I've been an attorney for over 40 years. And so again, I bring a prosecution experience. I know how to prosecute cases. I've been in court as a prosecutor. I'm not a defense attorney, although I must say that I'm proud of the fact that I did gain my first trial experience as a defense attorney when I was in the United States Army Judge Advocate General Corps, which also taught me how to be a better prosecutor, because I attack every case by looking at it and seeing how I would attack a case as a defense attorney when I do prosecutions. So again, I think my level of experience as a prosecutor is far greater. Again, it's just one of those things that's one of the important things. But I think the other thing about being a district attorney, though, is that people understand that we're also the counsel for other departments. And I've done this job. I know how to work. I love working with people. I like solving problems. And so I have a great deal of experience both on the civil side of government and as a prosecutor. And I think that combination is critical to being an effective district attorney.
My background is more of a mix, I would say, of private sector experience and public service. Having been a defense lawyer for a long time, There's different kinds of defense lawyers. There are ones who do it because they feel some sort of a social justice perspective. That's not how I approach it. I just believe that everyone deserves, and a system like ours needs to have confidence that when we send someone to prison, that we've done it the right way, and that we've safeguarded that person's rights as well. And I think that combination with the success I had being defense and then coming over to the prosecutorial side definitely gives me an advantage, especially in terms of analyzing cases and knowing just how strong our position is, because to successfully do this job, what it really boils down to is having the confidence and the ability to create the understanding on the defense side that when we say we mean business, we mean business. And coming out of the pandemic, that is really starting to bear fruit for us. We just had a case where someone killed 3 people in a DUI incident. The blood test was not done within the 2 hours normally required, but because of the preparation that my team and I did, we were able to get that person to plead to DUI death for all 3. And that's an example where they knew that we were prepared, they knew that that was the best that they were going to get, and those are the kind of results that we're starting to get coming out of the pandemic and that we will continue to get over the next 4 years.
Can you talk about some of your goals for the office of Nye County District Attorney?
Mr. Kunzi.
I would say my first primary goal in taking over the district attorney's office is really to start to get the numbers back up to what's actually being prosecuted. And it's interesting that the pandemic is now being used as an excuse for why cases haven't been filed. The reality of it is every agency across this state has been prosecuting cases, but what we see here in Nye County is very disturbing numbers from the standpoint of how many cases are actually getting prosecuted. And quite frankly, the number of cases that have been prosecuted by this administration is actually less than what is being prosecuted by the previous administration, which is actually about 375 cases less per year than we were prosecuting when I was district attorney. So again, I think that's one of my priorities, is really to get prosecutions going. And I think the first thing is, I think to make it the prosecutions work is a better relationship with the sheriff's office. Because what you need to do is oftentimes we don't get cases that come over with enough evidence to meet it beyond a reasonable doubt. But what we did and what we do is we work with the sheriff's office, we work with them to get the evidence we need so that we can effectively prosecute it. You can't just simply slap a piece of paper on a file and say that it's insufficient evidence and toss it aside. You need to learn how to work it, and that's how you get prosecuted, and that's how you protect the public.
First of all, I'm not trying to win a prize for racking up the highest number of cases filed. There is a notion of efficiency. Since my administration was attacked, I would respond by saying that under my opponent's administration, they lost something like 14 or 15 jury trials, which is an astonishingly high number. And that's part of a lack of proper screening and vetting and knowing what cases need to be negotiated and what cases can go to trial. As far as working with the sheriff's office, we've been working very successfully with them on a number of cases, some murder cases, the recent fentanyl prosecution, there was close collaboration there. And I think that it's important to also keep in mind that there's NDI, the Nevada Department of Investigation, and other agencies that we've been working with. As far as the numbers are concerned, the numbers that my opponent uses, I guess, came from the Justice Court. I know the FBI Uniform Crime Report would not support the idea that we're sloughing off on our duty. That comes from data provided by the Sheriff's Office, and our own internal information doesn't show that. And I would also point out that when I took office, there were approximately 2,000 cases that hadn't even been looked at yet. We got that down to almost 0 when the pandemic hit. And as of right now, even having dealt with the pandemic, it's under 300, which is like an 85% drop in cases that haven't been looked at. But if the quality is not there, we will ask the sheriff to help. But if they don't come back with the information, there's really nothing we can do.
Mr. District Attorney.
Is there any rebuttals?
Yes, One thing I want to reference, one, I don't think that number is even close to accurate as far as cases in which there were acquittals on trials. But the other thing is that it's also a very false number, because the reality is almost every one of those cases that went to verdicts that got acquittals was actually being handled by the Attorney General's office. It was a person who was embedded in my office, but they were handling all the crimes against children. And unfortunately, I had no control over how those cases got prosecuted. So again, that's not a real number of anything that reflects what happened
Thank you,
under
Mr. Kunzi, that's your time.
my watch. Thank you.
All right, any other rebuttals? Okay, we'll go to the next question, which you guys kind of answered this a little bit, but not completely. How would you approach a case that was sent to you by the Nye County Sheriff's Office that, in your opinion, did not have supporting evidence for the charges that the subjects are facing?
District Attorney Arabia.
It's very simple. There are some cases where you can see just from what's submitted that there's nothing there, there's going to be nothing there. However, the normal thing to do would be to reach out to someone in the sheriff's office. There's been a little bit of a bumpy ride there in the sense that at times we were limited in who we could speak to, but we've on numerous occasions gone back to, and I've done it myself, gone back to a detective or a deputy and said, you know, this is what we need, or can you talk to this person, or what have you. And then after the case is charged, we would handle it with our investigators, but before the case is charged, generally we would go back to them.
Yeah, I would just say that this is an easy question for me because it's something I've actually got a lot of experience in doing. And I've also, worked with Sheriff Worley when she was an investigator in my office. We know how to do this. And again, I maintain that, maybe some cases are getting worked, but the reality is the bulk of cases are not getting worked. And they're not getting worked because there's not the cooperation with the Sheriff's Office that there needs to be. And that's one of the things I take pride in. I want to build a team environment, get everybody working together, because that's how you get the cases prosecuted that need to get prosecuted. And in particular, home burglaries have definitely been neglected. And again, those are issues that we have to address. We have to take a very aggressive stance with them, and you do it simply by working very closely with the Sheriff's Office. We have to be partners. We can't do this solo. And that's one of my key goals, really, is to make sure that we start building up the teamwork with the Sheriff's Office and all the other departments as their counsel to make sure that the work is getting done the way it needs to get done. Because you can scoff at the statistics all you want. These statistics actually come from the Nevada Supreme Court, which are delivered by the courts, and the volume of cases over this past administration is continuously dropping, and we just simply cannot continue to decline with the number of prosecutions that we've been seeing in this county.
Is there any rebuttals? All right. If you inherited a case in which a plea deal were made that you did not agree with, how would you approach that conflict?
Mr. Kunzi.
It's kind of an odd question because, you're going to inherit cases that you may not agree with the plea deal, but if the plea deal's already been entered, there's really not much you should do in that particular case, if that's what's been done. If it's still in the infancy stages and you're working forward, then certainly, you can step in and take a look at it. But one of the things that I really like, again, when I talk about team and having everybody work together, is that we have a lot of discussions in the office. I have a very open door policy. We have a lot of discussions about cases, and so we kind of stay in unison of how the cases should be done and what deals should be done. But ultimately, as district attorney, it is my obligation to really only allow deals to go forward that are just and that are appropriate. But honestly, in my years, I've never really had to step in and do that, because I think what you do is if you build a strong staff who understands the direction you want to go, then everybody rows in that direction and you really don't get these issues. But again, ultimately, if there was something that was bad, that was unjust, that needed to be fixed, I would certainly step in and take it, assuming it was still a time when I could do that.
My answer really wouldn't be different in any substantial way. It's obviously a business where someone's word, the value of their word counts for a lot. I suppose there are exceptional circumstances where that may be the case, but the truth is that once it's signed on our part, we pretty much are bound by that. And so it is important, as my opponent said, that staff understand what direction it is that we want to go in and what our general philosophy is. And that's kind of really all there is to it. There could be extraordinary circumstances where there's a huge injustice, but even then it might be something where you ask the court, but generally it's not a good idea to do that.
Does anybody have a rebuttal? All right, can you talk about how you would approach a case in which there might be a personal conflict of interest?
District Attorney, you're on it.
That actually has come up from time to time, and it came up recently where there was a case that I referred to the Attorney General's office. I'm not going to go into the details, obviously, but that is a situation where sometimes it's required to go to the Attorney General's office, other times it isn't. And then there could be cases, for example, because I did defense work, we've had some cases come up where a former client of mine is being prosecuted, and in that scenario, all we have to do is I block myself off from the case, I don't have any involvement, and that's pretty much how that is done. It's not really something that's difficult. I mean, obviously I'm not going to get involved in a case where it's a former client or discuss it with anyone in the office.
Well, I have to be careful with the question of might. It's not a question of might. And obviously you have to be very, very careful. If I have a conflict of interest, that case will definitely get taken out immediately. And it doesn't have to go to the AG's office. In fact, we've actually done cases with other rural DAs where we have an agreement where we'll handle cases for each other. But you just simply have to get it out of your office if you do have a conflict of interest. And I think that's something you always have to be very, very conscious of. And so again, that's just something that I do. I take a very serious approach to looking at conflicts, because you don't want to have those conflicts, and you want to get them out of the office as soon as possible. I had a situation where my brother got in trouble and pushed a kid, and I didn't even see the report. I basically just said, send it to, I made a deal with Pershing County DA, and it's like, send the case there, because I'm not touching it. And so again, it's like I don't even want to see the report if I have a conflict on it. So I do take that, that is something I take very, very seriously, and it's something that you have to be very conscious of. I do disagree though with the idea that you're going to wall yourself off. This is a small office, and I think if the DA has a conflict, I think that conflict actually imputes to everybody in the office, and my practice would be that I would move that case out of the office and not just simply try to wall myself off of it, because again, it's a small office, and I think there's going to be too much risk of there being contamination.
Is there any rebuttals?
Just briefly, the Nevada Supreme Court and I myself think that it is not always necessary to do that, and there are going to be exceptions to that, but it is not required. It obviously would depend, and it is a small office, but that doesn't mean that walling off is always inappropriate.
All right. Can you talk about how much you would be or are involved in cases that your office is prosecuting?
Mr. Kunzi.
Well, I think as district attorney, I'm really the leader. And so again, when I talk about how I've operated my office in the past, it was really a very collaborative effort. So I do get involved, not in every single case, but I have a lot of discussions with the attorneys on a constant basis. Again, you'll never find my door closed unless I'm in a private meeting. And I like the bullpen atmosphere of the DA's office, where people will get together and talk about ideas. We share trial strategies. Again, with my years of experience, there's not too many attorneys, with the exception of Kurt Vitta, who's our chief, who's really done more trials than I have. But again, so I do try to pass that experience on, and we do talk about cases, we do trial strategies, and again, a lot of it is, I really look for a very collaborative environment within my office. I want everybody involved, I respect everybody's opinions, I want to hear people's opinions, because again, I know I don't have all the answers, but I think together, when you're working together, that's really how you come up with the best policies and the best practices of prosecuting these cases.
And again, I don't really differ with that answer. That's what we're doing now. We have certain cases, obviously, that are big and complicated. We sometimes will have 4 or 5 people in the office work together on it. We sometimes will have everyone to discuss something, but I know, as an example, the Angelson case, the 3-year-old who was murdered, there were 5 of us that really focused on that, and I felt that case was important enough to actually join Kirk Vito on the trial team for that. But absolutely, it is one of the joys of the job is to sit in the conference room or out in the bullpen and talk about these issues and try to figure out what we're going to do and what our goals should be with the case, and if we're going to trial, how we're going to do that to make sure that we get a good result.
All right, is there any rebuttals? All right, along that same vein, can we talk about your management styles, not just with attorneys, but with staff, and how you resolve conflicts and have an atmosphere where your staff and attorneys can flourish?
District Attorney Arabi.
Thank you. I do believe in the top-down format. However, I try to keep a relaxed atmosphere and give people a lot of leeway as far as I'm not, hovering over them all the time. But at the same time, obviously, we have to keep watch on things. Now, it's more complicated in a situation like this because, unfortunately, in the county, you're going to have employees who are more interested in clocking time than in contributing to the mission of the office, and they have a very strong union, and so that can be frustrating to have employees who either can't or won't pull their weight. Puts an enormous amount of pressure on the people who do and can pull their own weight, and then they end up pulling weight for other people. But I think that encouraging people, talking to them, and acknowledging when they do things well, and trying to work with them when things don't go as well, those are the important things. And as far as the attorneys are concerned, I think it's important to delegate, and I ask basically 3 things from them. Keep me in the loop, don't lie to me, and show up on time. And people who do that flourish, and it's really that simple.
My management style is probably not usual from the standpoint of I really, really work hard to foster a very cooperative attitude within the office. And a lot of that starts with me showing trust in the staff. And if the staff knows I trust them, then I can trust them, and everything works well together. Because again, I think in an attorney's office, the administrative staff is just as important as the attorneys. I want to hear their opinions as well. And the other thing is that we deal with some very unusual, nasty things in the district attorney's office. And I honestly believe in ways of trying to figure out how we can keep things light. And sometimes you just have to break loose. And one of the things that we did that you talked to my former staff members is we kind of ended up starting having Nerf wars on Friday afternoons to kind of cut tension. Just crazy things. I like going out of the office and having team events, things like that. So anything that we can do to build a better team, to cut the tension that we have to deal with, the cases we have to deal with, I look for innovative ways of involving everybody and hoping that everybody knows that if they have a problem, they can come to me, and they can come to me without any fear of there being any retribution, because we will try to work together to find a solution.
Are there any rebuttals? All right, how do you plan to hire and retain qualified staff and attorneys?
Mr. Kunzi.
That's always an ongoing issue, but one of the things you just have to deal with it. One thing is I do have a lot of connections, so it makes it easy for me to kind of mine where there might be people coming into the state. But again, it's not easy, but it was something that we never had an issue with when I was DA. Never had an issue with shortages. I always had attorneys that were able to cover the court cases because we didn't have enough attorneys. We never had that issue. So again, I've always been able to find people. State Bar has systems that you can use to recruit people. There's also a really unique situation in Nevada where we can actually hire out-of-state attorneys who aren't licensed in Nevada, but they can come work for a rural DA. I have used that in the past. That's a good mechanism to bring people in. They're then required to take the bar exam within 2 years. But again, there's a lot of creative ways you can do it. But again, one of the issues is you just have to stay on top of it because, like I said, it's not anything I've ever really experienced because I never had any staff shortages. We were always able to fill any vacancies that we did have.
That is a challenge, and it was certainly a challenge during the pandemic, and it was a challenge that was partially caused by events that happened when I first took office. Unfortunately, there were people in the office who refused to accept your choice of me as a district attorney, and that caused a lot of friction and led to some changes, and that was unfortunate. It certainly isn't the way that I had wanted things to go. We did have a little bit of a time during the pandemic. I had a deputy one of our best deputies who died, and we were a little bit short. But as soon as the pandemic wrapped up, we've brought in some amazing people the last few months, and they know who they are, Cal, John, Talia, for example. And so we have some really fantastic people, and Talia's been around for a couple months. She's already known as the Velvet Hammer around the courthouse. She's exceptionally polite, but she gets the job done. She doesn't take any gruff from anybody, and is getting really good results. And it is a challenge, but I think that as we go forward, especially now, we're getting to the point where I'm getting congratulated by senior people in Clark County on some of the resolutions that we're getting on cases, and that's the kind of thing that's going to make it a little bit easier moving forward. But I love the team that we have right now, and so it's not at the top of my mind just because we're full and they're really good people. But it's always something that we're mindful of.
All right, any rebuttals? All right, let's talk a little bit about your knowledge of the law. How creative are you in finding avenues to ensure that justice is served?
Mr. Kunzi.
I'm not sure I like that question from the standpoint of being creative in interpreting the law. Okay, I think that could get you into trouble. The law is what the law is. It's hard for me to answer that question because, again, I don't really believe in creative interpretations. But again, the bottom line is our primary issue is to really be as effective as you can. But we have to be ethical. I am not going to ever allow anything to go on that's not ethical. If it doesn't meet the letter of the law, then we don't file that charge. It's that simple. I'm a very strong believer in limited government. And the government cannot be oppressive. And I think that starts with the prosecutor's office from the standpoint of being creative in how you're trying to prosecute cases. That's just not something that you should do. And that's not even a thought that would even come into my head. Because again, you have to follow the law, you have to do what's right. And again, I think that trying to put creativity in there to me really is just a code word for doing something maybe you shouldn't be doing. And that's something I would completely stay away from.
Creativity could be a troublesome word in that context. I think an example, though, is if you have, let's say, a murder case where you'd like to get the guy to plead to second-degree murder. There are several ways that you can charge first-degree murder that are completely ethical, and sometimes it takes a little digging and sitting with somebody like Kirk, the deputy chief, who's been around forever. to come up with a solution like that, and sometimes you end up getting a really good resolution. There is another context. We did have one case where someone helped themselves to quite a hefty sum of money improperly, and what we were trying to do in that case was, usually nobody gets their money back in a case like that. The person doesn't have it, or makes payments that don't add up. And we structured a plea deal to have a very extended period of time during which the person would make efforts to repay, and then basically, depending on how that went, it would affect the ultimate outcome. It was kind of a complicated process. I don't know if that's creativity necessarily, it's just a smart approach, but there are things like that can be done to try to get better results.
So you need better.
I just want to add that I wasn't really referring to how you do plea bargains or things of that nature. I think the question really went more towards really how you actually do the charging. And that's something that, again, I just think, I don't like DAs who think they can play games with what the law is. Let's just enforce the laws that we have.
We all know that when we hear the results of criminal cases, the public can sometimes blame the sheriff's office, the DA's office, the judge, and sometimes the blame is misplaced. Can we talk a little bit about how open you would be to the public and the media when it comes to criminal cases of interest, whether it shines a positive or negative light on your office?
Mr. Attorney Robbie.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that? I'm sorry.
How open would you be to the media or the public when it comes to criminal cases of interest, whether or not it shines a positive or negative light on your office?
That's a really good question. I've had a few cases where I've gotten raked over the coals pretty badly in the media, and I didn't necessarily think that it was my fault, but I also didn't say anything because I just didn't think it was appropriate. Cases do sometimes go bad, and that's unfortunate. Sometimes it's the evidence wasn't there, somebody makes a mistake, whatever. There are different ways it can happen, but I kind of believe that it's really not a good look to get too vocal, blaming other departments. And there have been a couple times when the opposite, that courtesy has not been extended to me. But I do believe that we're a team, and even I try very hard not to succumb to the temptation to do that. And I think, though, that problem has actually shrunk, I guess, during the 4 years, which is something that I'm happy about. It's a lot better now than it used to be. And I think a lot of people in my office and some other offices deserve credit for that.
I think one of our primary obligations is to be as open to the public as we possibly can be. And I will never throw anybody else under the bus. All I will do is talk about reasons why we took the action we took. And that's about the only thing I can do. But the whole thing is that at some points when a case is first coming in and we're looking at it, obviously that should not go out to the public, because we don't want to jeopardize the fact that we may need more evidence, and so you don't want the facts to get out there. But once I've made a charging decision, or once I've made a non-charging decision to claim that we are not going to prosecute a case, I am completely open to the public to have them come in and discuss the case with me, and I'll be more than happy to sit down with any person who's filed a case and explain what issues we had and why we weren't able to prosecute it. That is something I pride myself on. I believe we have to be completely open to the public. I think the public has a right to know. And again, all I can do is tell them that these are the reasons why we took the action we took, or if we chose that we weren't going to file a case, why we did not file a case. And I will also explain the efforts we did to try to get the evidence that we could do. So again, I am completely open to the public. I think the public and the media have absolute right to know, because quite frankly, every case that comes into the DA's office that is either prosecuted or not prosecuted, the public has a right to know, so you can judge whether or not we've done the job that we're supposed to do. And I'm not afraid of letting you come in and look at our files.
Thank you, Mr. Kunzi.
Is there any rebuttals? What are some of the ideas that you have to ensure that residents here in Nye County can have faith and will continue to have faith to live in our safe community?
District Attorney Roberts.
Thank you. Well, I think the first thing goes back to something that I referred to a while back. The main thing that we can do to be effective is make sure that the defense bar, the public defenders, other defense attorneys understand that when we make offers and whatnot in cases that we mean business and that we are prepared to take it to trial and get guilty verdicts. And that leads to, we're moving the needle. It's a slow process, but we're getting better outcomes. That is something that has improved relative to what we charge, and if it's negotiated, what's negotiated. And having that credible threat, I think, is incredibly important. And then the other thing is that we're not perfect, and neither are other offices. And I've had situations where I've been under a lot of pressure to take an action for whatever reason, and I haven't done it because I didn't feel that it was appropriate, regardless of what other people might want. And sometimes that does lead to tension and less than it leads to tension. And so I've maintained the independence of the office. I'm always happy to work with other people and other offices, but at the same time, I'm not going to do a go along to get along approach. I will be independent if that's what the right thing to do is, and I think that's kind of how I handle that.
I think the public has faith in what we do if they trust what we're doing. And again, that all starts basically with being open and transparent with what we're doing. I think that's absolutely critical. And I think the other thing is that the public needs to trust. They have to trust that we're actually going to prosecute cases. And again, one of the concerns I have, again, is home burglaries, which really have not been a priority of this administration. And home burglaries are serial crimes. Okay, they happen time and time again. You can't slap them on the hand. You've got to take them seriously. It's interesting that our code actually calls home burglaries crimes of property. No, I disagree. It's crimes against people because they're invading people's interests. You need to take it seriously. And again, if people have a trust that we're going to prosecute these people, because again, the problem is they're committing crimes left and right because what they're doing is they're trying to break into the next house to get their next fix. If you don't take them seriously, you're going to have this problem of these recurring crimes. And so again, I think again, I can serve the public and they can trust me in knowing that we are going to prosecute these cases and we're going to take them seriously. And that's how you build up the trust factor.
Any rebuttals? All right, if you noticed, witnessed, or suspected a fellow staff member, employee, or another department or elected official doing something unethical, how would you handle that, and would you report it?
Mr. Kunzi.
Well, again, I don't think anybody who's doing something unethical or illegal should ever be condoned. And that's something that we'd have to look at very seriously. Again, some of it might be a situation where it might be a conflict for the DA, but more than anything else, and I think one of the things that people don't seem to understand about the DA's office is we're more than just a prosecuting agency. We represent all of the departments. We have, we go everywhere basically and have to work with these people. And so the bottom line is, if you see people doing something, my first thing is I'm going to sit there and talk to them and find out what's going on. Advise them to be careful about what they're doing. Be active. You have to have a relationship with the people that know that they can trust you. And, again, it's one of those things where you can't let anything happen. You can't ignore anything. And particularly when it's other government officials, you have to be very aggressive in making sure that if you can't stop it, then you're going to have to do something. And that may mean referring it to another agency for investigation or prosecution or whatever has to happen. But again, you cannot ever turn your back on these issues. You have to be aggressive, you have to be upfront, and you have to try to do everything you can to make sure that those situations do not happen.
I think there's a distinction to be made, obviously, between my office and other offices. I know that in my office, that's something that I take seriously, and I've had a couple situations that I've had to deal with, and there are different solutions. It depends obviously on whether it's admin or attorneys, just because the admin people have a very strong union, and so frankly they can get away with a lot before they're going to be able to be properly disciplined. However, I think that it really depends on the specifics, but I've had a situation where I transferred someone from one part of the office to another, and there have been a couple times where I've had to let people go, and I think that, you know, we're no different than, in my view, any other employees in a place in terms of being accountable for what we do. As far as other departments are concerned, that can be a little trickier. It really depends on the particulars, but I think it's appropriate to alert someone, and that could be a department head or the county manager, depending on what it is, and then work with them as far as what a solution might be. And I think that it's a challenge just because of all the different departments and different levels of who has what protections, but it is something that obviously needs to be taken seriously.
Any rebuttal?
I did want a quick rebuttal here, and that's this comment that the employees can get away with a lot before anything can happen. That is odd to me. No, they can't. If you have the evidence, if you have the case, if you have misconduct on their part, it is not hard to get rid of them, right? Where you get into trouble is when you try to do things and you don't have the evidence. You're trying to do things that aren't legitimate. Yes, you're going to have problems, but if you truly have issues with a classified employee that's union protections, you can do it.
Any rebuttal? What do you think the biggest issue facing the county is right now?
Mr. Kunzi.
Well, I think from the district attorney's office, again, I really do think that the biggest issue we have is really to reverse the slide in the number of prosecutions we've been doing. But the other thing is just from my perspective of looking and seeing what's happening in the county, I don't see a lot of cooperation between the different agencies. Everybody seems to be kind of rowing in different directions, and I think that that's something that we have to fix. I believe the district attorney's office is one of the most critical elements in county government, and quite frankly, I think it's the ultimate team game, because you have to work together. You have to be able to work with all the different departments. You have to be an agency where they can come and they can trust that you're going to give them legal advice and work with them, because my goal is to let's try to figure out the problems ahead of time instead of trying to clean up the mess after. And that's one of my mantras that I try to preach, that to please come forward and let's work on it. Now, I'm also not afraid of we might make a mistake. And the bottom line is, if I make a mistake, that's okay. So I'll make another decision to fix it. And if you don't make a decision, then that's how you have problems. So again, I really have the courage to make decisions and to try to help other people to avoid these issues.
I think it might not be unique to Nye County, but I do think that in a broader sense, there's a moral and spiritual decay that's going on. It's been worsened by the pandemic. We have a lot of people in trouble out there. Drugs, we're getting fentanyl overdoses and whatnot. There's a mental health epidemic and kind of a move towards Pahrump, I don't know, for lack of a better word, becoming sort of like a mini California or a mini Vegas. And I think that all of these things are things that threaten our well-being as a community, and I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I know we are going after fentanyl, and I'm hoping one of the new attorneys we're working on trying to down the road set up a mental health court. Drugs and mental health, that's about 80% of crime, leads back to those two things. And I think that I don't have any control, and as the DA, I don't want to exert control over issues of growth and water and us becoming California. That's for other elected officials to do, but it is something that concerns me. My role with that is just to give legal advice, but I really think that I'm hoping as things get back to normal, that some of these problems will start to get better. But we are going to, over the next 4 years, do everything we can in terms of both advising the county officials and prosecuting crimes to try to deal with these problems.
All right. We're talking about, I believe we had a breakfast with the GA. I don't remember what we used to have, the meetings with the GA. We would have them on occasion. Donuts with the GA. How interested or open are you in listening to the public's concerns and questions? And would you have meetings like that again?
District Attorney, your audience.
I'm not sure that more donuts is what I need, but looking back, you don't do everything exactly the way you would have hoped. I remember I didn't want to take donuts with the DA because that was Angela's thing. I've taken a lot of phone calls from people, and I've gone out to the front door, to meet with people. But that is something that I think the first year was a little bit tumultuous, and that's something that kind of fell by the wayside. And then we had the pandemic where that wouldn't have been allowed. That's maybe an area that I could improve. I do like talking to people, and I get approached sometimes just walking around, and people ask questions. So I think that that's something that that I should reconsider. So thank you.
Yeah, I think meeting with people is one of the key things that we should do. The problem is really trying to figure out an effective way of doing that. Because a lot of times when you schedule these meetings, no one really shows up. What I like doing is going to the different groups, the library board, different DAV, different organizations. Periodically go to those groups and talk to them and see what's happening. And I think that's actually a little more effective way of actually reaching out to people instead of trying to schedule meetings for them to come in and talk to you. And the other thing is, quite frankly, that if you really have a true open door policy and aren't afraid of talking to people, again, it's like you're dealing with the people when they come in. But again, I like to be a little more creative, and like I said, I do like going and talking with groups. I will talk to any group that invites me, because again, everybody has their issues, and I think it's important to really meet with everybody and hear what's happening, because again, we can't know everything that's happening, and again, this is a big county. I spend a lot of time, I go up to Tonopah, I go up to Beatty, I go up to Round Mountain. You can't ignore all the areas in Nye County. You can't just stay here in Pahrump. And that's something I really think that is important for the DA to do.
All right. I know we're going to wrap it up. I'm trying to get some audience questions here. So I have two directed at Kunzi. I'm going to put them together here. How long have you been a Republican? Why did you change to Republican? And did you leave the Nevada State Bar? And that's for Mr. Kunzi.
What was the last question?
These are questions from the audience.
What was the last question?
How long have you been a Republican, and why did you change? And why did you leave the Nevada State Bar if you did?
Well, the simple answer is yes, I did leave the state bar. It was just one of those situations where we had been locked down working at home for 2 years, and it really was not a good situation. I didn't really care for it, and so we made a decision that it was time to make a change. So it was something that I was actually welcoming. The issue is I became a Republican. I changed my party probably about 7 years ago, and it's kind of interesting that the reason I changed my party is because of Reagan. I'm actually a Madison freak, if you can't tell, and it was interesting that Reagan actually, I read a quote from Reagan that talked about how, and what he said was, he called Jefferson one of the greatest liberals. And he says, Jefferson repeatedly said that the best government was the smallest government. The governments are not the masters of the people, but the servants of the people governed. And it struck me finally going, you know something? The party that really does represent limited government, trying to protect our civil liberties, really is the Republican Party. And like Reagan, I decided that yes, it was appropriate for me to change my party and lose that definition that I really had since my youth. in a small military town in northern Nevada that, even though it was Democratic, was extremely conservative. I've always had conservative values, and I think my conservative values are much more important as to what my label is or was as far as my political party goes.
And I have one directed at Mr. Arabia. What changes have you made in the DA office since you were elected?
Yeah, I'm sorry, say that
It
again.
says, what changes have you made in the district attorney's office since you were elected?
Well, the reason I ran for DA is, in having been a defense lawyer, the DA's office was, I don't know, just not good. And I have made a lot of changes. Some of them were forced on me, some of them were my own, but I replaced the prosecutor staff with the exception of Kirk Vito. And I think we have people who are more cognizant of the philosophy that I discussed earlier, which is, let's look at what the harm was and what the just outcome is, as opposed to picking and choosing and let's just hang all these charges on this guy because we can. That's very important to me. On the civil side, I have fantastic people, and so I have delegated with them quite a bit, but we also collaborate quite closely. And I have people now who are all pulling in the same direction. They're not just looking out for themselves. It was described as a viper pit, is how people around the courthouse used to describe that office. And it's not like that now. And I think that I've got a lot of good people, and we're united, and we're doing good things. And so overall, it's been a culture change, and also a lot of the personnel has changed.
Does anybody have a rebuttal? I think we have our 1 minute closing. All right.
I think it goes first.
Mr. Kunzi.
Thank you. I appreciate the Republican Party for putting this together. It's always great to be able to talk to people. And again, I just want to emphasize the fact that I just, above all else, want to emphasize the creation of teams across the entire lines of county levels so that we can all work together. I want to be part of the solution. I think it's important for the district attorney to be part of the solution. You have to be engaged, you have to know what's going on, you have to be willing to take criticism, and that's something that again, I'm not afraid of doing. Because my entire purpose of being district attorney is to do the best job we can in protecting the public and in protecting the county, and you do that through very vigorous, aggressive prosecutions, not piling charges on one person, but prosecuting many people, and making sure that you're representing the county and be an asset to the county so that we can stay out of some of the troubles that we get into. So again, I would certainly appreciate your support, and thank you very much.
I just want to say how proud I am of the people on my team and the work that they've done and the challenges that they've overcome. I think we're doing it better now than the Nye County District Attorney's Office has done it in probably 20 years, 15, 20 years. And that's a tribute to them, and I think they deserve the credit. Certain people certainly deserve more credit than I do. And I think that what we're doing is we're taking an approach which does a better job of achieving justice as opposed to achieving convictions. And I don't accept this trope about how we're not prosecuting cases. I see my people in there every day. They're putting it all on the line. They're doing good work, and I'm very proud of them. And I've been very proud to be your district attorney, and I hope I get a chance to finish the mission. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We had so many questions from the audience I wanted to go through. They were so good, too. All right. And as usual, the DA's debates are always great because they're litigators, and that's always interesting.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, very much.